So the first thing I did was imported some footage. So I just had this movie clip on my computer. I'm going to import another one too. So I'll go to File, Import, and I'll just find the clips that I want to edit. So once I've imported footage, you'll see them appear in this film bin, and that's where all of my clips will kind of live. Premiere has sort of these different tabs that sort of change your workspace to make different tasks sort of easier. So they have this assembly tab. That's kind of the first one that you encounter. And then they have this editing tab when you're actually ready to edit. They have one for if you wanted to color correct. They have one for applying effects. They have one for working with audio, etc. So I usually like to kind of just work in the editing window, but let's start with the assembly kind of tab because it's the first one you usually encounter. So I have these two clips here that I'm going to edit. So if I double click them, you see that they appear in my playback window, and I can just hit play to sort of play them. I think the volume is off on this. Let's see. No. We're not using volume anyway, but so if I double click on my clips, I can see kind of what they look like in my playback window. Right? And I can scrub through and kind of take out takes that I like and takes that I don't. If I want to move something to the timeline, it's as simple as kind of just dragging it to my timeline. So if I hold down my mouse, I can just drag the clip I want to add to my timeline. So I'll just add it to my timeline. And when I've done that, you can see all of this kind of information appears on my timeline. So I have my V1 is my video track one. So that shows me my first video track. And then I have two audio tracks down below it. Those are these. So there's two audio tracks because the volume is in stereo, right? So there's like a left volume track and a right volume track. So let's say what I want to do is kind of edit these two clips together. So I'll take that one clip called Tiga and I'll just drag it to its video layer. And then I'll take this Gene clip and I'll kind of drag it to where I want it to start. So now I have these two clips on the timeline. Each has its own video layer. So the video layers work a lot like your layers in Photoshop or Illustrator. Like you could kind of toggle their visibility if you wanted to. You could link them together, etc. So both of these videos have audio tracks. So when I play them, you can hear the audio playing. If for some reason you wanted to use separate audio, like you wanted to put in a voiceover or put in music, the way that you would do that is first you would have to unlink the two tracks. So you could command click, or I'm sorry, control click and hit unlink. So right now, the audio and the video tracks, they're linked together, they're synchronized. So you can't make a change on one without changing the other. But if for some reason that you want to, like you want to edit the audio separately from the video, or you just want a video with no audio, you can unlink them and click your audio and just hit delete. And now your audio is gone. If you didn't unlink them, you would delete both the audio and the video track because they're linked together. So right now, my goal is to kind of cut this. So if I watch this footage, there's this kind of footage that I don't want in the final video, right? It's like the camera person talking to her and setting up the shot. So I have this footage. The camera person's kind of talking to her. And then this guy walks through the shot. So let's find a good place to kind of cut here. So we know we don't want any of that beginning footage. We really just want when she starts kind of talking. So let's find, we'll kind of scrub through here and find where she starts talking. So this is kind of a good spot. So we don't want any of this stuff that's kind of to the left of this timeline where the camera person was talking to her, where she was sort of figuring out what she was doing and where the guy walks through the shot, right? So we can just kind of cut that out. And the easiest way to do that is to use your razor blade tool. So if you hover over these tools, they'll tell you what they do. But you want your razor blade tool, and you're just going to position it over your clip where you want to make the cut, and just click with your mouse. And now you have two clips. So if you go back to your selection tool, you can either kind of separate these. So now I've kind of separated all of this footage that I don't want. And I can just get rid of it. I'll just hit delete and it'll be gone. So there I've kind of trimmed my footage. And now I'm left with this footage that I want. Another way to kind of cut like that is before you even... So that was one way to cut, was just using that, again, that razor blade tool. Another way to cut is if you double click on your footage, you know what, I think this is footage that I already edited, is why it looks like that. Let me import something else. So I have this other footage here that I can also cut. So remember here I use the razor blade tool to cut away unwanted footage. You can also make your changes before you even drag footage to the timeline. So I'm going to make a cut here, and the way that I do that is by marking in. So my mouse is over the mark in bracket, and I can just mark in. So it put an in for me, and anything here that's not highlighted I've just cut out of my footage. And then maybe I want to mark out kind of there. So I'll put a mark out. So now you can see that the opacity on my timeline is different. So now my clip is really just in between what's in the mark in and what's the mark out. So once I drag that to the timeline, I've already kind of like pre-cut my footage. So there's two ways to kind of cut footage. One is using a razor blade tool, and one is using those ins and outs. So let's kind of try to edit this into something interesting. So maybe there, I'll cut to like a shot of Gene. I'll just kind of cross cut back and forth. So I can use my razor blade tool and I'll make the cut. And then I'll bring this footage of Gene in here. So I wanted to cut to the shot of Gene, but I don't want the shot to be this long. So I can either cut it, or if I just hover over that clip, you'll see that my mouse turns red, and I can just pull the clip in. So then I'll put a cut here too. So I can go back to my razor blade tool and I'll put a cut there. And I'll just move that. So all I'm really doing is I had these two kind of files that were video footage of two separate artists talking about their work. And all I'm doing in the editing is kind of cutting them so that my final product is sort of cross-cutting between both artists instead of just focusing on one. So now I'll bring this closer in on my timeline. So I'll put a cut here too. So again, I can just take my razor blade tool. I'll make a cut there. I'll switch back to my selection tool and then bring in the footage that I want to put in. So I'll just put one more clip here. So again, I can just take my razor blade tool. I'll make my cut. I'll just get rid of this last bit of footage by deleting it. And I'll bring in this last shot of her. And then I'll just kind of end it here. So I'll just cut there. And I'll get rid of the last bit of that clip. So that's the first kind of easy thing that we can do in Premiere, is import footage, put it on the timeline, use our razor blade tool to sort of chop up the footage that we have so we can get rid of, maybe scenes that we don't want. And then we can also use our timeline to assemble the footage any way that we want. So I can move this, over here so it starts at the beginning of the video, or I can move it to the end. So that's like a basic thing we can do with Premiere, is kind of manipulate our video footage like that after we've imported it. We can cut it, and we can kind of position it in the timeline however we want it. So now that I have these clips kind of positioned, it's got to render, I guess. I can insert some transitions. So to do that, I could go into my effects panel. So my effects panel, when I go into that, brings up this effects library on the left. And if I go into my video effects, I'll see kind of different video effects Premiere has available for me. I want to use the video transitions. So I'll go into maybe this iris diamond. And to apply it to my clip, I just take it and I drop it in between the two clips I want it to apply to. So now if I zoom in or zoom out on my timeline, and I can do that by pulling in this bar here, you'll see I dropped an effect in between these two clips. So it creates that effect. So I'll do that again. Basically, to use the transition effects, you just want to kind of go to your effects window, look in the video transitions folder for effects that you want. And then you just want to take them, grab them, and drop them in between your clips. You can't really preview it. I mean, you can put it on there, and if you don't like it, you can always get rid of it and put in another one. You know what I mean? But you cannot, there's no way to really preview it. But I had that kind of gradient, that wipe, and then I replaced it with this gradient wipe. If I don't like that, I can get rid of that, and I'll try maybe this cross zoom. If I don't like that, I can try this, I don't know. I'll try this dip to white. So the basic thing that we did here, just kind of as an introduction to Premiere, and then I'll let you guys play with it also using the footage that you shot, is we used our razor blade tool to make cuts in our footage. So we kind of brought our footage in, and then we used our razor blade tool to kind of cut it into segments. And then from there, we could either get rid of footage that we didn't want or reposition footage on the timeline so that we could show things in whatever order they made the most sense to us. And then we also went into our effects panel and used our video transitions to put effects between the videos. We'll use this program throughout the entirety of the semester, so we'll go over what these other video effects do, like motion, opacity, time remapping. But for this intro, all I want you to do is take the footage that you shot on your cameras and upload it to your computers, bring them to your timeline, and start cutting them so that, and stringing them together so that it makes some sort of sense. So bring your footage in, cut your scenes so that you're only kind of looking at what you want. Like if you have parts of your footage that you don't want, you need to cut it out. And start editing your footage and using effects with the footage that you have. Does that make sense? So I'm going to turn on the lights. It's 7:36. I'll give you a 15-minute break. So 46, 47. You can come back at 7:51. Then we'll start playing with Premiere a little bit. And I'll be around to kind of help you too. So 7:51, please come back.